Okay, hello my friends, and welcome to the Chennai Masters 2023, a super tournament in India that has been devised for the arguably sole purpose of qualifying someone by the FIDE circuit for the candidates in 2024. Now we have Arjun Erigaisi, we have Gukesh and we have Parham Magsudlu, albeit by the rating spot for Magsudlu, all competing for a place in the candidates. Now, just to preface, the first 4 rounds have taken place, and it's an 8-player tournament. Magsudlu was already out the running. He needed to finish on 5.5 out of 7, tragically lost his first game with white to Elyanov, and has since made too many draws to warrant the rating spot, much to the relief of Wesley So, no doubt. And also in other news, Linnea Dominguez has withdrawn from the Sitges Chess Festival. He was also unable to gain enough rating to overtake Wesley. He lost roughly 4 or 5 points, despite scoring 4 out of 5, I believe it was. So, Wesley seems all but to have secured the rating spot, bar one little hiccup that I'll discuss at the end. But for now, we have Arjun Erigaisi and Gukesh Damaraju. Arjun needs to win the tournament outright, sharing points with no one, and he will overtake Giri in the FIDE circuit. Gukesh, on the other hand, I believe can have a 3-way tie for first, and there's some intangibles with the tie breaks and things like that. But let's get into the games. Arjun opens up with e4, and we get a bit of an open Sicilian and a Sveshnikov with d6. Arjun jumps in, we have an exchange in the middle, an early a4, bishop d3, and knight h4 from the Serbian Grandmaster Alexander Predka. Arjun ignores any threats that could possibly be posed, possibly on this g2 pawn, and just dives straight in, f4. The guy needs to win games, and despite losing his first round matchup, he's trying to recoup these losses. Predka hits back with a6, knight a3, nowhere else for the knight to go. Takes, knight g6. And Erigaisi, interestingly, just volunteers his bishop. Why that is, I don't know. Perhaps he quite liked the structural damage that results from it. But okay. Knight c4, queen c7, b3 guarding the knight, and b6 now from Predka. And we'll notice that there's this little 4-on-3 here. Predka possibly trying to create a bit of a bind, stop white from advancing, because he knows that's where he's weakest. But bishop e3, and he's just created a bit of a target for himself. Already that pawn is hit. Rook b8, only move, of course, you've got to guard the pawn. Bishop d4. Bishop slides out, knight d2, rook comes across. c4 now from Erigaisi. Eva bar just twitches slightly, but it isn't immediately clear why. Bishop e3 check, take and take, rook e1. The queen sets up a battering ram here. Do not blunder this, of course, so Erigaisi slides out of the way. Bishop f5, and now knight f3. Was he Predka start to have a slight advantage he could prove? Here he has to find rook d3, and it all gets very complicated by this point. Obviously the queen is hit. Computer wants knight d2, but queen d4, rook a2, and this pressure just seems to be insurmountable. I mean, there's pieces flying everywhere. I mean, God forbid these pawns flew off the board and this rook slid across, you wouldn't survive. But after bishop g4, instead, take, queen d4 looking for a trade, Predka takes, we just get a fairly straightforward endgame where, okay, Erigaisi, as mentioned before, has this structural advantage on the queen side. What can he do with it though? He starts by crashing through with a5, Predka plays b5, take, bishop takes, and an interesting decision from Erigaisi, really trying to squeeze every last drop out of the proverbial stone here. Goes king g1, because of course you could just take the bishop, rook b5, but you already land yourself in a world of pressure. You know, pawns are hit everywhere. It just isn't a convenient move, even though realistically it may well be drawish. Erigaisi does the sensible thing, keeps pieces on. But an inaccurate play again, rook a4, this time can be punished by f5. Again, not immediately clear. So we get rook e8 instead. Rook b4, check, king f2, rook e5. The knight is starting to venture on in. Hits the rook, hits the pawn. The rook now has access to the back rank as well, in a more menacing fashion. So rook e2, king f3. And here the rook slides across to a2. It's already a more difficult position than the eval bar would care to admit. There's a couple options, the weirdest being probably g4. I can't quite explain that one, but I suppose building up a bit of a blockade on the dark squares with f6 could be reasonable. Or you can go king h7, or perhaps you can go rook b2 and try and hit this weakness. But yeah, Predka goes rook a2 after rook b8, king h7, and here a borderline winning move of knight b4. Erigaisi just has an incredible advantage to prove. After maybe something like bishop e2, maybe king e3, and rook b2. The rook is close to infiltrating here, getting this pawn. The knight can move out of the way, so the rook will guard here. Of course we don't get any of that. We just get an immediate rook d8 instead. f5 now, takes the pawn, bishop e4, king moves up, Predka tries to cash in, and here rook d8, g5, and now a bold decision here from Erigaisi. Do you march forward, do you step back? Erigaisi opts to be brave, marches forward, which is the correct decision, allowing Predka another pawn. I mean, this just looks absolutely terrifying. But Erigaisi stands unafraid. Knight d4 now the only winning move. Can't be too hasty. That's quite an obvious one. Knight d4, rook a2, and b4 now. How are you going to get to this pawn? The knight will sit here pretty, and there isn't a whole lot you can do. g4, d6, g3, d7. Only one man is quick enough. Rook h8. A brilliancy, yes, also quite a common idea. If you aren't familiar with this technique, then I suggest you learn it. Rook h8, take, because now you free up the square to queen with check. And now it's just a case of cleaning up. The pawn is threatened. Doesn't quite take it yet. A little bit of shuffling around. Knight check. A nice idea here as well. Takes, because if you take back there's queen f2. And the game swiftly ends with a forced mate threatened. If, say, you step back here, for example, it's not the threat of the bishop hanging, it's actually queen d4, and it's mate whichever way you look at it on the next move, because you cannot prevent queen c5. King is boxed like a fish, and Erigaisi scores an incredible win over Alexander Predke, despite losing his first round matchup. Now, if we flip over to the other side of the coin, unfortunately, Predke is in the firing line again. We start off with another Sicilian, this time a Rosalimo. Knight jumps in. Quite a weird move order. I don't believe I've seen one like this before, but that may well just be my ignorance. Bishop g6. Capture a pawn. Knight steps back. White temporarily up a pawn, but no doubt it won't last very long. However, here Predke does misstep. He's got many moves to play. I mean, the evaluation doesn't mean much at this stage. You know, bishop e7 as an example, just a quick step back, move a rook somewhere. Decides to be courageous and jump straight in. And there's one option here, knight h4, whereby I believe, although it's quite subtle, I believe the idea is to jump into f5. You maybe have this square at your disposal, this square. If you can try and get this bishop out of the way, because the rook is occupying the f8 square, then you will have dominant control over the dark squares, despite your dark square bishop being all the way back here. Gukesh doesn't spot that. Instead, Predke does what he came to do, step in and take a pawn, and then gets out again. He's rubbed the cookie jar and he just ups and leaves. a4 now, hitting the queen, doesn't blunder it surprisingly. Bishop b4, takes back, and we're up a pawn again. Now rook c2. No, that isn't hanging. The bishop is there to cover it, don't worry. But after b3, as we saw in the Erigaisi game, bringing a pawn forward in support. Rook slides across, bishop c4, and this just isn't enough. This is not enough from Predke. He tries to claim back what is rightfully his, but after knight d4, rook d2, which was the whole idea, now queen e1. He cashes in, of course, but here there's a nice winning idea of rook a2. Oh no, my rook, don't do that. But we don't see that. Instead we see an immediate e6. Still a good move, but not the most accurate response. But queen d6, check, king h3, and now naturally you would think this rook and this queen support the pawn all the way through. Let's just lock the pawn off, and after rook e6 and one of these rook checks, and perhaps you take maybe queen d3. You're down in exchange, but with so few pawns on the board, there's certainly hope for you to hang in. But queen d6, king h3, and Predke lashes out with h5. I don't know if he just assumed his position was already dead lost, which there is an argument to be made there. Tries to play some little tricks, hoping to get some checks in, get active and try and checkmate. none of it works. E7. Rook takes. Gukesh now promotes. He has 2 queens, 2 rooks, a bishop. Bishop takes. We cash in here. Sacrifices the bishop in order to play rook e6. Here, here, here. Hide away. Sack the queen. The rook gets taken back, but just look at the material count. 1 rook, 1 rook. Nice. 1 queen, 1 queen. Also nice. But then there's this guy in the corner, isn't there? And that's the underlying issue here of Predka's position. This just is not enough. Rook e1. Queen slides over. Rook e2 to block, and Gukesh scores a win himself over Alexander Predka. Now the standings after 4 rounds are as follows. Gukesh, as mentioned, needs just to tie for first place, I believe with a maximum of 2 other people, and he is currently in the lead, tied with Pentalahari Krishna on 2.5 points. Then there's a big pack of people, all on 2. We have Levon and Aranyan, Pahan Maksudlu, Pavel Alyanov, Sanan Shitgurov. Probably butchered that, but we move. And Arjun Erigaisi. And then Alexander Predka at the bottom on 1. Arjun, obviously, with needing to win the tournament outright, half a point behind with 3 rounds to go, looking slightly unlikely. But Gukesh, on the other hand, seems to be in very good stead to replace Anish Giri in the candidates via the FIDE circuit. Now, as mentioned, Wesley So is the other constituent party in the candidates race that is not playing games currently. He leads the rating spot at the minute after Linier pulled out of Sitges. But Ali Reza Firouzja, currently 2750 thereabouts, has announced and is currently playing a 4-man tournament against some older 2500 level grandmasters from France. He's won the first game of this match, and I believe he needs to win another 4 games in a row, and then he can withdraw from the final game of the tournament and he will overtake Wesley So for the rating spot. 1 draw and it is over for Ali Reza Firouzja. He has to win every single game, essentially. So I will keep you up to date on his success there. 1 game down, 5 to go. It's almost like Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet, I think would be the best comparison to draw upon. But of course, doesn't impact Gukesh, doesn't impact Erigaisi, as they're only looking for FIDE circuit at this point in time. But I'm sure Anish Giri is rambling away on Twitter somewhere in the hopes of putting them off via some other abhorrent tweets, I don't know what. But I'll keep you all updated on the race as it stands. The candidates is looking pretty shambolic, to be quite honest. It's incredibly hard to manage who is going where. But it makes for good entertainment, at least, that much can be said. So thank you all for watching, guys.